Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Savannah Rose. I typically make videos about living the brightest life you can, starting with what you have right now, and I usually throw a little humor into it because that's just who I am. But this is actually going to be a different kind of video. As you have seen, there are a lot of big changes happening in the world, and there are a lot of fights being fought that where people need to bond together, and we need to choose a side and stand by it rather than just sitting quietly and rooting from the sidelines. So this is me cheering and joining. I'm going to do the best I can not to edit this video. I want to be as authentic with you guys as I possibly can. This is going to be a bit more of a serious topic. Excuse the positivity at the beginning. It's just how I tend to do these videos. But today we are going to be talking about the prison system and police and how they affect the Black community. A lot of surface level information. I want to let you guys know that I'm not a professional in this kind of topic. I'm going to have my notes the whole time. And like I said, I just want to do as little editing as possible to be as authentic on this topic as I can with you guys. So I'm going to be doing this for a little while now. Every Wednesday is going to include a video about pushing for equality. For a couple months now, we are going to be focusing on the Black Lives Matter movement, as it is the most current thing that we are dealing with right now, and it's the one that needs all of our attention the most. So, to dive right in, I want to remind you guys that slavery was abolished in 1868, and after that happened, there was a lot of backlash, there was a lot of lynchings, there was a lot of violence, and very little repercussions for all of this violence and atrocities. One of the biggest things was Emmett Till. When he was killed, he was found in a river, and his face was irrecognizable. And his mother decided to have an open casket funeral so people, for one, could see him, and for two, could realize how severe this problem had started to become, because it really wasn't until this event that started to open people's eyes to how serious things were. There were the lynchings in the newspaper, and there was the Emmett Till's photograph in the newspaper, and people didn't really realize the extent to which people were being affected until these pictures started to come to light. And this built up, obviously, momentum and led to the civil rights movement, and then eventually the ending of Jim Crow laws in 1965, and then, no, 1964, and then the Voting Act in 1965. Unfortunately, despite the fact that there was an improvement, people weren't separated anymore, separate but equal, and they could vote, but then came another issue. After that happened, the government still was seeking to find ways to oppress these people, because that's just what they wanted to do. Black people have been taken advantage of since they were brought in on slave ships, killed by the thousands on the way here, and then used up until they couldn't work anymore as slaves. And then even when they were freed, unfortunately, it didn't actually turn into freedom, and it still isn't completely so. For an example, even after slavery was abolished, there was still convict leasing going on, which meant that if you were convicted for a crime, you could be leased out as basically a slave, as a laborer, because you were a prisoner, and that was part of your serving your sentence. So there was constant attempt to take advantage of these people, even after all of these major landmarks of there should be freedom and equality, but there aren't. So following the Voting Act of 1965 was the war on drugs, which was originally started by President Nixon, and it was continued for the next several years through Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, continual propaganda on war on drugs, and this suddenly just became a very big prominent issue right after the civil rights movement happened. And this would seem like more of a coincidence, except there was a lot of propaganda, there was a lot of news headlines featuring specific words like thug or criminal or super predator even, with pictures of black males' faces, typically black males' faces, to represent this entire epidemic, this entire issue. And so even if it wasn't explicitly being stated, these people were being used as examples of what the enemy would look like, of who to avoid because they're probably going to be on drugs. These political figures used this as a tactic to gain public favor because obviously they thought they were being protected from this cause, and people were very naive to the fact that they were targeting a specific group of people, because obviously nobody was coming out and saying that this is exactly who we need to fight against, who we need to worry about. But it was but upon analysis, it's pretty clear. And also there have been political advisors who have come out and specifically stated that, of course, we knew that we were using terminology to hide the fact that we were talking about black people. There would be cases where black people would be offered plea deals that would take years off of their sentences, or would sometimes completely erase their sentences as long as they pled that they were guilty, in which case this just fueled the propaganda even more, and all because people were afraid of being sent to prison, especially because the prison systems were and still are not humane. People are degraded, they're beaten, they're mentally beaten down. Many people have committed suicide in prison because of the fact that it's like you're being treated like an animal. And a lot of people try to say that policemen are trained and that they're trained for the job that they have, and so they're perfectly capable of doing it. But we've seen plenty of videos of people in prisons being beaten, being degraded, being just absolutely humiliated. And it's been proven through the Stanford prison experiments that when you give somebody too much power and they are encouraged to abuse it, more often than not, or see other people abusing it and know that they're not going to get reprimanded for most things that they do to abuse that power, they're going to abuse it, and therefore we end up with not very much reformation. We should have people in these prisons helping to reform people. Anyways, I digress. It wasn't until Khalif Browder actually did not take his plea deal. He was accused of stealing a backpack, which he actually never even stole. And he was offered a plea deal, I think, to just go home. And he didn't take it because he didn't see that as being just. He didn't do the crime, and nobody would have heard his story. Nobody would have realized that this was going on. It was one of the biggest cases that brought to light that these people were being bribed to admit to crimes so that they could propel that image of the thug, the criminal that the government was portraying for people, the news was portraying, the media, everyone. Even it got to the point where even black people were starting to believe that they were the problem. Like, mothers would think that their sons were causing all of these problems because of what they'd seen on the news. It was terrible. But Khalif Browder served 3 years in prison, and he attempted suicide several times. It was a terrible experience, obviously, because he was mistreated and horribly beaten and humiliated. And when he got out, he told people, I didn't do it, and I wasn't going to say that I didn't do it because then nobody would have heard me. Nobody would have known my story. And unfortunately, shortly after he was released from prison, he committed suicide because of the mental turmoil and the PTSD that he must have suffered from having to stay in those prisons for 3 years. So things start to become more dense in the prison systems. They start to build more prisons, put more police on the street for the war on drugs, and people are just starting to get thrown into prison left and right. It wasn't a matter of, do you know somebody who's gone to prison? It's a matter of how many people do you know that are in prison. They came up with the law that you have to serve at least 80 minimum sentences. You have to serve 85% of your sentence, no matter what. You can't get off on good behavior. You have to serve at least 85%. So if you have a 15-year sentence, you're going to be in prison for at least 10 years before you can get out, no matter what. The 3-strike law, basically, if you were sent to prison 3 times, you're put away for life. It doesn't matter what it was for. It doesn't matter if you were actually guilty for all 3 of the crimes. If you are sent to prison for 3 crimes, you're put away for life. And they also oppressed people by putting, have you been convicted of a felony, on job applications. So obviously that makes it so much more difficult for people to find and make a living, because even if you didn't commit a crime and you were arrested because you look like the perpetrator, you could have a hard time finding a job for the rest of your life just because of one mistake that you've made. And So more and more and more people are just getting thrown into prison. I wanted to bring up the story of the Central Park Five because it really highlights the extent to which this affected many people, especially young black teenagers. The Central Park Five was a case where 5 teenage boys, 3 of them under the age of 18, were sent to prison to serve 5 to 15-year sentences because they were accused of raping a woman in the Central Park. And she was in a coma for 12 days after it happened, and so she wasn't able to say that they were the ones who caused the crime. So they were put on trial, and Donald Trump put an $85,000, he spent $85,000 on an entire page in the paper to advocate for bringing back the death penalty for these people. They were under the age, most of them under the age of 18, and he wanted to bring back the death penalty. He spent $85,000. And towards the end of their sentences, the real perpetrator came to light and confessed to the crime. So Donald Trump wanted to have these 5 teenage boys killed, put to the death penalty. And if that would have happened, 5 boys would have been killed who were not even guilty of the crime in the first place. And because, of course, of the 85% whatever, they served most of their sentence before they were ever released from prison. And this is our president, ladies and gentlemen. So what I want you guys to leave off with on this video, and again, I know it's a little all over the place, I'm doing the best that I can to be composed and authentic, and really just to give you guys this information to think about, because it's really important that we recognize the extent to which this is affecting a large number of people in our society. So the population of African Americans in the United States is approximately 13-14%. The population of African Americans in prison in the United States is about 40%. How? Tell me, how is it that we have a population of 13% through the entire country, and in the prisons it's 40%? 40%, and people want to say that they're usually just the ones doing the crimes, so obviously they're going to be the ones in jail. Why is it that you think that they're constantly being convicted of these crimes? They're being profiled, they're in more broke neighborhoods, in some cases trying to seek out opportunities to make money, and there's this huge war on drugs making it this huge issue. There's the, oh, you look like our suspect, so we're going to pull you over and harass you just because of the color of your skin. And there's just the fact that so many people aren't guilty. I mean, you've seen the videos of policemen just absolutely, like men with handcuffs, their hands behind their back, being beaten by policemen. Unarmed men. These are the people who are supposed to protect us. These are the people who are supposed to be protecting our rights and are supposed to be protecting the community, not beating people because they can when they have their hands behind their back, or stepping on their neck when they didn't do anything wrong. There's so many people saying things like, if you don't want to be handled by the police or something like that, then you should respect them. I'm pretty sure that George Floyd was just saying, I can't breathe, when he had a foot on his throat. I'm pretty sure he was just pulled over for using like a counterfeit check or $20 bill. And he should have died for that? No. No. So that's what I got for you guys today. I really hope that you take this information and soak it in. Go seek out more information. In order to acquire this and to make this video, I watched the documentary 13th on Netflix. It's about the prison system and policemen and racism. So I'm sorry it took a while for me to get through this. It's really, I'm an empath, so it's a little hard to talk about, but it's important to talk about. And I usually make more positive content, but it's not really, we need to be real about what's going on right now and really expose ourselves to it. So I encourage you to do more of your own research. I encourage you to do what you can to support the cause. I will leave a whole bunch of links down in the description below for places you can donate, where you can learn more, articles that I used to put together this video. So thank you guys so much for watching and for doing what you can to learn more and to be an active ally. I really appreciate I really appreciate you guys being here. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and keep fighting the good fight and keep standing on the right side. Hopefully we can come to a point where there's true equality and where people aren't allowed to serve our country on the police force unless they're trying to serve everyone in the country, all peoples. Sexual orientation, skin color. That's the goal. Real equality for everybody. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching.